The overwhelming amount of health experts sharing general medical advice across social media for women 40 and over who are experiencing changes in their body, including menopause, can give the impression that women are getting the care they need. But are they really? Hello and welcome to Beyond Diagnosis, a podcast to raise your awareness, decisions, and voice for alternative practices so you can take back control of your health. I'm Rita Michelle, your host, a mindset and empowerment coach, and the founder of the Onus platform. Join me each week so you can create the health of your dreams. Michelle Aspinwall is a medical, intuitive, and hormone expert who believes we are all as unique as our fingerprint. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hi, Rita. Thank you so much for having me again.
It's great to have you again. We had you last year, and if anybody wants to grab that and listen to that episode, it's all about hormones. It's back in February. So please listen to that one because Michelle shares so much great information there. And this one we have a little where it is still about hormones and women's health, but a little bit of a different perspective. I love the way we're going to go with this one. And you also believe that women, the way women think, that what they believe supports and nourishes her body can shift her from disease to thriving. So,
Yes, completely.
yeah, it's very important. It's that whole mind, body, spirit. I think a lot of people leave out the spirit as part of that. So you help your clients achieve this through what you call body and soul attunement. Can you walk us through what that means and how it helps?
Totally. So, body and soul attunement is this really powerful connection. And I use the word harmony a lot in my work because I don't believe that the body finds balance. I believe the body finds harmony. So, in any given moment, one hormone is doing one thing, one hormone is doing something else. Our nervous system is reacting to something else. Because, of course, as I'm sure everyone knows, and if they don't, our endocrine system, which is the system that is deals with all the hormones in the body, and our nervous system are both governed by the hypothalamus. I think we talked about that in the last
Yes,
episode. But at
yeah,
any
I
rate,
remember.
the hypothalamus is a really powerful gland. It's like the lighthouse of the body. And this attunement that I like to talk about is this kind of harmony between the systems of the body and what the body is doing internally with the attunement to our soul. And our soul does, in the way that it feels to me, is our soul definitely is within the body. It's an aspect of the body. And of course, the body is the densest aspect of our entire auric body. So we have all these different levels of our auric field, and the body is like the central, it's like the innermost, densest aspect of the auric field. And so attunement is really, and especially as it comes to as it speaks to this particular season of life, which, for me, for us, for the women that I generally work with, it's a season of life where our body is really quieting down our ovaries and the biological function, growing and sustaining life. We're really kind of being less about the unit of the family and bringing ourselves back home. And this is where the attunement becomes really dynamic and potentially very exciting for expansion for the individual woman, as how she relates to herself, her family, and the world outside of her. So attunement really is about harmony, the harmony between the physical body and the harmony between the soul or the spirit of the body.
That is incredible. I love that. You just don't hear people talking about that when it comes to menopause. Mainly when it comes to menopause, people will go, well, take HRT, hormone replacement therapy, have blood tests done to see what you're deficient in, or put up with the night sweats, or you just got to deal with it, that stage of life. It sounds more sort of mechanical, like this is what happens, this is what you've got to do, this is your next step. Whereas you're taking in the very essence, the very life of a woman, and you're looking at it that way.
You couldn't have said it better. Honestly, like I couldn't have said it better. I truly believe that the current narrative online, especially as it relates to women's health and the process of gathering time, which of course is the way I think of aging as a gift. I think of aging as this, as like a gathering of a basket of gathering of, flowers or whatever, and we're gathering the lessons and the memories of our
Mm,
of our life, right? And so I really believe that I call this a season of life because it is fleeting, these, 15 or 20 years of like midlife. This particular season is not one of deficiency. And I think that the online narrative between, doctors branding themselves and becoming internet famous and having book deals and, growing a following and creating courses, like more power to you. You know what I mean? Like we all need somebody. We all are looking to hear what's happening and what's outside and what people are saying. But I think one of the things that if I'll die on this hill, is that basically the way I see this season of life is that as one thing is kind of quieting down, it's kind of it's like a second blooming, if you will. And so we're coming into very deep, very wise years. And if you look at, and I'm not the person I haven't done this research. I've just sort of gathered this through listening to other people who share the same flavor of aging as I do. But, there's a couple of other mammals in the world, and they also go through the menopausal process. And the beauty of it is that the species that go through menopause tend to be the species that are more matriarchal: elephants, whales. And there's an element of like really carrying along that wisdom generation through generation through generation. And the males don't live as long and the females live a little bit longer. And that's very true.
mm,
Obviously, not across the board, but generally, women tend to live, 4 to 5 years longer than their male partners. And I
mm.
think that part of why our ovaries quiet down is because we're not meant to grow and sustain life until the end of our life. We're actually meant to have personal purpose, like, whether it's purpose work or, how you connect to your family. And then, of course, passing on this wisdom generationally through either your own family, your own offspring, or those that are part of a more nuclear family, something that's, less conventional.
God, it's amazing. It's very much sounds like you work with respect to the natural rhythms of the body. Like
Completely.
this is what naturally happens. You're not forcing against it, you're going with it. You know,
With it.
yeah,
Exactly.
with the body's intelligence. I mean, the body knows what it's doing. It creates a human life without you needing to interfere. It knows when to,
Anything. Yeah.
which month something needs to happen. It's just incredibly intelligent, and I love it that you go with, not against.
Mhm.
So I know from your work, you regard menopause as this initiation from the physical ability, like you were just saying, to grow and sustain life to the spiritual upward spiral of wisdom and generational knowledge passed on. And how does that work that you do there help someone who may be feeling that they're all over, they're not coping with the symptoms of menopause?
So that's a beautiful question. And the first thing I want to say is that in this world, in this current world that we're kind of living in, I think there's a lot we've been led into, or kind of we're attracted to this external reality, this external validation, whether it's, forever youth or forever thin or forever beautiful, forever rich, like this whole external world. And I think the more that we are drawn to this external validation, the less we really believe and the less we understand and the less connected we are internally, because there are so many clues and cues that the body uses and gives to us. It affords us such a beautiful way in to the wisdom that it possesses. I couldn't agree more. The body, and really I live my life that my body is positively brilliant. And like you said, without a whole lot of input from me, it knows exactly what to do and takes over, even when I'm doing things that aren't necessarily serving me. And that's the part of the work that I really thoroughly enjoy doing with women is helping them see, the biological aspects of them, the nervous system, the endocrine system, really building reserve within the organs. Like organ reserve is really part of vitality and longevity, but then also combining that with this emotional, spiritual aspect, which is like, what do you actually believe is going on? What is that narrative that we hold within us, whether we hold it in an organ or in our heart or in our consciousness? Because whatever that narrative is, we're running circles around it in order to not bring it into the light. It's this aspect or this part of us that we're trying to kind of navigate around rather than kind of really staring it in the face and really coming to terms and really shifting or pivoting out of that dis-ease of what is actually what our perceptions are. Life shows us where we aren't free and where there isn't spaciousness within. All we have to do is get up every day, interact with our families, interact with our coworkers, interact with our own bodies. Like one day I wake up, I have so much energy. I do 45 minutes on my yoga mat. Other days I wake up, it takes me like a few minutes to stand upright. I'm creaky, I'm stiff, something's like achy down at the bottom. And I have to connect in with those things, work through them, bring breath to them, and really hear the dialogue that's coming through me, through my body. And so this is what I mean by like bringing the physiological with the spiritual, bringing the science and the spirit together. And I think that, that is what life is. We are biological creatures, right? We're real. We can touch ourselves, we can see ourselves, we can measure ourselves, but we're also entangled with this soul or this spirit that lives through us. And to say that we're only energy, because I work with a lot of women that are energy, either healers or work with energy, and they too can be very disconnected from their physical essence. It's as though their physical essence, they can't feel it and it's dense and it's uncomfortable. And then I also work with women who they've gone to every functional medicine doctor, they've had a myriad of tests, and they've collected 4, 5, 6, 7 diagnoses with a whole bunch of protocols and pills, but they're missing the spirit. They're missing that connection to their soul that's saying to them, look, have you ever considered that aspect that happened, that thing your husband said to you 15 years ago, isn't actually your truth? Or have you ever considered that what you thought was your mother or your father not relating to you was actually them not being able to hold space for a big emotion that you had? Like, we're carrying those things in our tissues.
Mm.
And so when we learn to navigate those, the physical aspect of the body, it can't not heal itself if given half the chance. But the problem is we've got this wellness industry that's, worth so many billions of dollars. And we've got people on the internet speaking about every kind of, we were joking about this before we started, like, comment this word and I'll send you the miracle recipe for, lower your cortisol. And it's like, if it were that easy, that we just have to create this concoction of 5 ingredients and our cortisol would magically lower, like, don't we think some pharmaceutical company would have created that by now and been marketing that under some name and patented it? Like, it doesn't work like that, right? So it's
Absolutely
kind of,
does.
I don't mean to like put anybody down. I know everyone's just doing their best, but it's like the body is complicated, but also the spirit shines through. So if you don't feel vibrant, if you don't shine when you look in the mirror, then there's the work. The beginning of that work is to see where you aren't free and where you don't feel spaciousness within, ease and spaciousness.
That is incredible. What a beautiful explanation of what you do. And now I really understand what you mean by the body soul attunement. You have to attune, you have to become aware and feel, that what's holding you back, what's making you feel heavy. And I love your example of one day you get out of bed and you bounce out of bed, the next day you can hardly even stand up, and you actually don't force yourself
Mm-hmm.
to move through that pain. You actually sit with it and try to work out, what am I thinking? Why is this pain here? What's been happening? What are my thoughts around it? And that is such, because we know that our thoughts affect our physicality. We know
Mm-hmm.
that, if our soul is shut off, you have that, you know, sort of deadness to you. You're not vibrant, etc. And how that would create harmony in the body. So, can you explain what are some of the things you actually do to help women bring themselves into this harmony? Because there'll be so many women listening to this episode who are on HRT, who are, well, oh, I don't, nothing about HRT. It absolutely does wonders for so many. But they're just looking for the outside input to help them. So, what do you do if a woman comes to you with a lot of symptoms? What do you do with them, and how do you start specifically so someone listening to this goes, you know what, that's what I need?
Yeah. It's a great question. So the first place I start is I scan their body energetically. I scan their body. I have their permission. Scan their body energetically, and certain parts of their body speak to me. And knowing that certain parts of the body. So this is a beautiful part of the entanglement of the science and the spirit. So we have these the chakra system, which I think most people have heard of the chakras,
Mm,
right? So they're these energy plexes that align the spine, right? We have seven that align the spine. There are many, many more, well over 100, but the seven that I mainly talk to women and use them in the healing process are these seven that align the spine. And each one of these chakras has not only a nerve plexus, a bundle of nerves from the nervous system, of course, that connect with the nervous system, but also have an endocrine gland. So there is this very distinct like electrical and chemical system, but there's also an energy to them. It's palpable. You can feel it, and they develop over specific ages in time. Like the root chakra, which is around the base of the spine, it encompasses the hips, around the hips of a woman and or man. This is where we learn safety. This is where we learn and hold safety and security, and also where we give away, where we change ourselves in order to be nurtured and cared for. This is how we learn love, is in these first 7 years of life, because the chakras develop over 7 years. So the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. And these chakras, it's easy for me to describe this because a person, a woman, a client I can point to the place of the body and I can say, okay, inside of here, you're holding something. So we need to work on that. And usually we're holding something in that chakra. It's going to elicit a certain physical response or a certain emotional response in the body. So
mm,
for example, a woman may have had an instance where she couldn't find her mom, and for a good 20-30 minutes she was disconnected from her mother, or maybe someone who was adopted, like, and put in foster care for a couple of days before, so she went from her birth mother to foster parents to then adoptive parents. So there's that interim period. So someone like that is going to definitely have like attachment, or potentially even have issues around safety or even abandonment. And that's going to show up in your life. You're going to see that in how you attach to relationships, how you attach to friendships, what kind of pressures do you put on your children if you have any. So you're going to see it. What's going on inside your body is going to be mirrored outside of your body, because that's what source does. That's what energy does, is it shows us as above, below, and as inside, outside. So the
mm,
first thing I do to answer your questions, I read the energy of the body. I talk to the woman about what I see going on inside. And then I ask her, what is your experience? What symptoms are you going through? What diagnoses have you been given? Let's talk this through. And by understanding how she is experiencing what she feels in her body, and then what I'm getting from her body, Then comes the formula. And the formula, we go through these 5 different areas. I look at, her nervous system. So how her electricity is lighting up. Because a lot of times something will be really lit up if there's too much energy, or something will be very dim, there's not enough. I look at her chemistry. So sometimes I look at blood work, or I read hormone tests or something like that. And I see how the chemistry of the body is working, because that is going to create emotions, because chemistry is like receptors on the body. So those hormones are going to attach to a receptor and elicit a response that we can feel. And then I've already talked about the chakras. So then if it needs a physical response, like you need to nourish yourself in this way, or let's add this herb because this herb is going to help foster this energy to move. And it's also going to help to grow this trust and safety, for example, in your root. So I look at, I use the chakras as our springboard, because it's tangible. You can understand it, you can touch it, you can feel it. And then, of course, everyone is dealing at some point, because of course our life is finite, we're dealing with an aspect of how we view aging. Now, when I was 25, a 50-year-old woman was like my grandmother. I mean, she might as well have been my grandmother, right? Like
Absolutely.
music, right? Like her fashion was old. Her music choices were something that didn't align with mine. And her hair was gray. And she was funny and maybe having a great life, but she seemed a million years away, right? Now, as a 50-year-old woman, I feel as vital and as exciting, and I sing and dance to the same old music I listened to when I was in my 20s as I do now. And so it's like so who I am now is a mirror of who I was, but I'm not thinking about who I'm becoming. That's not what we do typically. We're typically trying to defy time. We're trying to slow down or reverse the clock. And so part of this aspect of how we move the energy in the body is I want to see how someone relates to aging. Are
Mm.
you starving yourself? Are you trying to make yourself so thin? Because that's going to change your physiology. Are you injecting and doing things with your face? There's no judgment. I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter how someone chooses to live their life, but how you live your life is a mirror of how you feel about what your life symbolizes. And that's going to change how your body responds to itself, to you, and to the process of vitality and longevity. And and of course, nutrition is like, nobody talks about food, I have found, in the way that I do, because I don't think of food as macros and micros. I don't talk about diets. I eat, this is what I say, and there's not a religious bone in my body. I eat biblically, meaning I eat foods that were found in the Bible, old foods that have been around for thousands of years. And the way that we combine foods for our unique constitution is everything. So I look at someone's constitution, and then I make suggestions. I listen to what they like and what they do. And then I talk to them and explain to them, if you made these couple of choices, you're going to see a stark difference in your cravings, in the quantities of food that you're eating or not eating, and in the way that your body responds to food. Because, of course, we're only as good as what we can digest. So if we're eating a lot
Yes.
of food that doesn't work with our constitution, our digestion is just using all that vital life force energy to try to break down that food to get it out. Versus when we eat foods that are really dynamic in constitution, they create organ reserve. We don't feel full and bloated, and everything moves through us in the most sacred way possible.
Wow. I love that. Definitely, just touching on the food part that you just mentioned is if you are a bit attuned to your body, you can feel when you bring in certain foods and they stress. You can feel the stress.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely can. Like when I eat
Mm-hmm.
dairy, which, I shouldn't be eating dairy, I can feel that stress on my stomach. I can feel
Mm-hmm.
it the inflammation go to my brain. If you're attuned to it, so, that would definitely have an impact, would you say, on someone's hormones, if they're,
100%.
or some people say, oh, I didn't perspire at all during menopause, and someone said, well, I drip like a tap. Would that have an effect on how your body is responding? Because as what you're saying here is you work individually, everything is personalized. There is no one size fits all with your work.
Ever, ever. There is no one size fits all. I mean, there are certainly things that overlap, but there's nothing, there's no one size fit all. And I would also add, because you brought up the idea of night sweats or hot flashes, that's what we call them here in America, is even that is unique and specific to the person. Like I will ask someone a myriad of questions. For example, the way that I should I go into how I see hot
Yes.
flashes and how that does that is that helpful? Certainly, the way that we nourish our body. Well, the first thing I want to say is your hormonal experience, that experience that takes you from your fertile, menstruating years to the years where your ovaries quiet down and then the energy is very downward during our fertile years. If you think about it, there's a distinct vein that goes from the heart to the uterus. That's what creates the sacred blood that feeds the aspect of that fertilized egg. And if it doesn't get used, then of course that becomes our sacred menstrual blood. So, hot flashes, or excuse me, if you're pregnant, the contractions feel are very much of a downward pressure. Menstruating is a downward experience.
Mm, mm,
Menopause actually is the shift of it from an energetic standpoint. Menopause is actually the shift from the downward force of energy to the upward force of energy, because in the years of 40 to 50, actually 35 to 50, those upper chakras are coming into completion. And so the energy is rising up in order to open the crown. And when the crown is open, then we are accepting energy from the divine. I mean, we're always accepting energy from the divine. We are mirroring back to source, an aspect of source, so that source always has, because source is just, it's like our brains, it's living in a void, right? It's living in the dark. And then I truly believe that we're all aspects of source, just mirroring an aspect of source back to it, because consciousness cannot be gained without a relative aspect to itself. So without something to mirror back to it, source is just energy.
mm.
And so I think that that's part of the ongoingness of the human race, right? And so to go back to what you were saying about that is like with a woman, when I'm working with a woman who's in menopause and maybe having hot flashes or night sweats, the first thing I'm going to ask her is, do they start below the belly? Like, do you get a flush around the belly and then it moves upward? Or do they start at the top and do they move downward? Because those two things are very different and we treat them differently. Like they're two different aspects of self. So if one is more prevalent than the other, I'm going to do one thing for one and one thing for something else. And to answer your question, there's an aspect of us that is very geometrical. So there's the sacred geometry in the body, both inside the body and outside the body. I'll give you an example. If you take your palm or your hand and you spread your fingers, if you put your palm, you basically cover your face. So your hand is the size of your face. Your foot is generally the length inside the wrist and the elbow. So there's all this really beautiful sacred geometry within the body.
Mm.
And then this sacred geometry, as we've all seen when we cut open an heirloom cantaloupe or an heirloom squash or an heirloom green bean or something, we see a geometry that isn't there in the super hybridized world of fruit and vegetables that at least we have here in America. I don't know about the rest of the world, but here we've hybridized vegetables to the point where they can last for weeks on a truck, and then we get them and they last 5 or 6 days in our refrigerator. But the reality is, if we really used heirloom seeds, we would have that sacred geometry, and that's going to interact with our mitochondria, with our subatomic level inside, and it changes us. It'll change our consciousness, because our consciousness is based on what we take in. Our food becomes us, becomes our blood, becomes our organ, becomes our brain and our consciousness and our hair and our skin. And So I want women to think about it. In fact, this might be the perfect time to say, like, if I could tell women anything, I would say be very purposeful about what you put into your body because it ultimately becomes you. Now, do I order a pizza, a takeout pizza with my kids every once in a while? Of course. Do I enjoy a greasy burger and fries and a milkshake every once, a couple of times a year? Of course. But am I eating that stuff 2 or 3 times a week? Never. I'm not going to sleep well. It's going to change the way I think. It's going to change
Mm,
the way I observe the world. And my sacred geometry will begin to change because that food isn't made from real, living, alive organisms. It's dead food.
absolutely. Absolutely. You've put it perfectly. It's the whole push for people to get off processed food and start eating real alive food. And what we mean by alive food is the fresh produce section in a grocery store or a supermarket. Stay away from those middle aisles. You know,
Yeah.
I look at our supermarkets here, and I think it's the same in America compared to Europe. We have dedicated aisles to chips and chocolate
Mm-hmm.
and lollies and soft drink, and which you would call soda, and it's insane.
Yeah.
Most of the prominent real estate in a supermarket is for dead food.
I would even take it one step further and I would say go to your farmer's market or, you
Mm,
know, become friends with people that are growing real food in their gardens because that relationship with those growers, like the love that is coming through, that kind of spirit is coming through that food in a very powerful way. Like I go to the farmer's market every Sunday, I take pictures, put it on my Instagram, and I have relationships with all of those farmers. I ask them when is because I'm not from Texas, I live in Texas. And I don't always understand the growing season because it's so different than it is anywhere else in this country because it's so hot in the summer. Like very few things grow in the summer. Most things grow in the fall and the winter and the spring because it's much milder, which is the opposite of the Northeast where where I lived for so long. But I have this really intimate relationship with my farmers in that I ask them questions and I ask them like, how would you prepare this? And would you cook this in the oven or would you saute it? Would you eat it raw or would you mix it with things? Because they're going to have that really beautiful sacred relationship where their biology has touched, their spirit has touched that food, and then when they give that to me, that exchange, that energetic exchange, our auric fields are also exchanging. And so all of the healing that I do and all of the work and healing they do and how they grow things is that's also being exchanged when we have an experience like that with our food. So I would say I absolutely agree. Like if all you can do is grocery shop, definitely stay away from the middle because that's, of course, as Rita said, where the dead food is. And then if you can even supplement that with local, real,
yeah.
just been plucked that day or the day before food, you are going, that is going to change the way your body functions, the way your mind perceives things, and your connection to your own heart in such a powerful way.
Fantastic. Can you describe, is there any, all food is sacred, but is there any particular food that you can describe to our listeners and viewers of what you mean by the sacred geometry? Like if you cut it, I know you mentioned squash, etc. before, and is there a particular food that you see more common amongst women during menopause that if they ate that, it would help balance them more?
Definitely. So when I talk about sacred geometry within food, I all food has geometry, right? If you cut anything open, there's going to be almost anything. Watermelons are kind of an exception. Like we're starting to grow things and hybridize like the mixing of seeds in order to make things more convenient for the modern consumer. Like I don't eat anything that doesn't have seeds in it. Like I ask my farmers like, are these waterless seedless watermelons, and they're like, oh yeah, and I'm like, no thank you. And they're like, what do you mean they don't have seeds? You don't have to worry about it. When I eat a watermelon, I want a watermelon to have seeds, and I eat those seeds. The seeds are part of the experience. Maybe I don't eat all of the seeds, but I do chew them and I eat them. They're incredible fiber. They're life force energy packaged up in a little teeny tiny seed. And so when you eat that, you take in the life force energy that has so much life force in it. It's able to grow a plant that then can produce, if given the right conditions, a giant watermelon. It's kind of phenomenal like that. So the sacred geometry is really eating things that are as close to heirloom as possible. And if you talk to your farmers or you ask your grocery store, like, do you have any heirloom produce? I mean, in America, that's the word. I think it would probably be the
It's
same
the
in
same
Australia,
here. Yeah.
heirloom. Yeah. So you want to eat, an heirloom seed is a seed that's been passed down. So every year that farmer grows something, and then that thing creates seeds, and then you eat the thing, but then you hold those seeds, and then you plant those seeds, and then you eat the. It's like it's generational knowledge. It's generational wealth. It's generational vitality from the land by which you're living. Right. So that's
Mhm.
when I say heirloom seeds. If you can get any heirloom variety of anything, my God, it's worth its weight in gold. So definitely try for that. But when I talk about sacred geometry, I'm talking about in the heirloom variety, you're going to see the seeds in a way, or you're going to see the flesh in a way that feels ancient. It's like if you look at paintings, Renaissance, like early Renaissance paintings, early Enlightenment period, there are these paintings of tables of food, right? So, I mean, these are ancient paintings from like
Yeah.
15, 1600s, and it's a smorgasbord, it's like a cornucopia of food. That's what I'm talking about when I say sacred geometry. It's the food that doesn't look beautiful and shiny and perfect. It's the food that's slightly irregular. It's the food that has a myriad of colors and textures, and albeit sometimes to a certain eye, maybe not as beautiful. But those are the foods we want to eat more of. And same thing with the animals grown, who've lived and grown in their natural habitat, is so much better than farmed animals who have been farmed in ways that are not sustainable and to them not healthy to them. In parts of the world we grow fish and we feed fish parts of themselves, like parts of their waste, and so that's not going to taste good. And then we're going to shoot it up with a lot of colors and dyes, and then we're going to call it salmon, when in reality, if we just ate the wild salmon, added a little olive oil on top or some sort of walnut oil or something like that, you're going to have a much more pleasant experience. And that animal is going to have lived in such a way that it's lived a life that feels um, not in terror for itself, right? So that's what I mean by sacred geometry. It creates a different experience emotionally, which is going to change the flesh of that animal, no matter what it
Mm.
is, or the flesh of that fruit or vegetable. Does that make sense, Rita?
Absolutely does make sense. And it's goes back to, well, actually, it's what I'm hearing from you is that, you draw upon so much ancient wisdom in supporting women and in health, but you do specialize in menopause. And it's taking and respecting the land, the animals, the plants, and then our body. And all of them have to work in harmony. It can't be, I'm going to eat junk food, but I want, a good level of hormones. I can't be stressed out and just grab anything and expect to feel balanced, happy, and even, emotionally and mentally balanced. It's like it's respect, everything's a flow. Like we are saying before, I think before we
Mm-hmm.
even started this episode, we were talking about how everything, you don't work against the body. You don't work like just take this and it'll stop that. You actually
Mm-hmm.
work, you flow with the body and see and respecting the body and what it needs at that time. So,
Totally.
I love your work. I think it's very special. I think it's very unique. And I really do really encourage women to contact you because you take an aspect of, well, you take a viewpoint towards women's health and menopause that not many do. Some say, yes, mind, body, and our thoughts affect our body, but it goes so far beyond that, which
Mm-hmm.
really you're honoring with your work. And I think it's amazing. It's amazing. I love it. And if you can just leave our viewers and listeners with one piece of great advice that they could actually do today to start being attuned to their body, that would be
Love
fantastic.
it. Love it. Yes, most definitely. And thank you. I receive those kind words very, very, I receive those in because that's a beautiful thing to be seen and heard and understood. And I appreciate that. So what I would say to all women, either entering this season or even women beyond this particular season of life, is to really continue to come back to the body, to use the body as a prayer, meaning there's sacred work as we do our sacred work to allow ourselves that connection back with the body because the body is always speaking to us. And so if we allow in our sacred work, if we allow ourselves to be open, the messages will come in, the guidance will come in, the nudges to do or think or be or say or reach out to someone or to do something differently, they will always come in. And I have found that um, and when I say the sacred work, I'm talking like doing the dishes, doing the laundry, washing the floor, cleaning the toilets. Like, can you have a relationship within your life where you tend to your home, you tend to your relationships, you tend to yourself, your body, the way you care for your body, the way you care for your home? Can you bring that into sacred relationship so that the work, as you do the work, the messages come through? I would say that is because I'm learning in myself as much as I love to hire people and really kind of share the wealth and like share the abundance around. I'm finding in myself the more that I create spaciousness within my life and do the sacred work myself, the more presence I have with my body in this home with these people at this moment in time. And there's a connection that is deeper and not lost when I'm just out doing, consuming, being, giving to others.
Well, I'm definitely going to look at housework all differently now. And that was beautiful. And that is so true. Wow. Do really pay attention to the way you're feeling about what you're doing at the time, whether you're putting that negative thought on it or whether it's something that you feel nourishes your soul to be doing that. Michelle, it has been so incredible. I've loved this episode, and I really hope so many people do that your message resonates with so many women and that they know they can balance their hormones, they can go from dis-ease in the body to a vibrant body, and it takes all these different aspects that you know how to put together for someone. Thank you so much for coming on, and for anybody who wants to speak to Michelle, book in with Michelle. All her details will be in the show notes. I really highly recommend you do. Thanks, Michelle. I would love to know, what was the biggest insight or aha moment you got from this interview, so you can now speak up, take action, and make informed decisions for your health. And if you like this episode, get instant access to your free ebook, Alternative Wisdom, Taking Back Control of Your Health, at life-onus.com.